Here we go.
Testing, testing. Check. Good evening. Today is Whiskey Wednesday, December 1st. It is 8:01 in the evening. Good evening. Sorry for taking a rest. It's been a while. I hope I still remember how to do this. Thank you very much, Sir Albert Rico, for giving us that beautiful song. Thank you very much for allowing me to use that. Again, thank you very much, Sir Albert Rico. Thank you. This will be hopefully brief. I'll just be going over a few thoughts about the promised book on Dr. Faust by Christopher Marlowe. Um, it's long overdue. It just required a lot of revisions. I was able to complete it, I think, a few days ago, and I just didn't feel like it was. I don't know. Sometimes we're overcritical of ourselves. Sometimes we're not. So I think I was just being overly critical, but I still feel that um, how do you say that? I may not be able to do this beautiful piece of art a um, proper justice. Hopefully, I can give it proper justice while we. Um, hopefully, I'll be able to give it justice. All right. So here we go. There is a very old saying: "Idle hands are the devil's workshop," and they have a saying that this may go as far back as the 4th century. I think the closest Latin translation to it is fac et alquid operis ut semper te diabolus inveniat occupatum. I believe that's from the letter of Saint Jerome. Hopefully, I didn't butcher that. It was popularized by Chaucer in the 12th century. It I believe, translates directly, idle hands are the devil's tools or the devil's workshop, something close to that. And I think this will be where our story revolves. Dr. Faustus. We'll start with some history. During the 16th century, there are actually two um, people that were said to fit the description of our good doctor. They are saying that these are real people. There is a belief that Dr. Faust truly existed. That this was not a mere creation of um, imagination. There are two very popular versions of the book. One is from I can't pronounce her name correctly. I think that's Goth or Goith. I'm really sorry if I'm butchering these names. Um, so right now, the book or the version that I am taking from is the one from Christopher Marlowe. The other version of Faust is from Goethe. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm sorry. That's also one totally very interesting version. I was thinking of using that particular text. However, I think it's far more, how do you say that? It's not really simple or complicated. Everything is open to interpretation, but I think the most closest to reality is the one from Christopher Marlowe. Like I mentioned, there are two people that are said to fit the description of our fictional Dr. Faust. We have Georgius Faustus Helmetenesis, or Johann Georg Faust. He was expelled from the town of Ingolstadt, Germany, and as a possible candidate, he is the one that's, I think, closest to um, closest to reality, the one that closest to the book itself. Almost all of the boxes are being ticked. If you look at Georgius Faustus Helmetes' life, it almost correlates to the fictional Dr. Faust. So I think he's the closest real person that probably the original text where Christopher Marlowe and Goethe took the inspiration of their book. And Johann Faust, uh, uh, I'm sorry, excuse me, is a German-born astronomer, alchemist, and they're saying magician as well, which was very popular during the German Renaissance. And many have tried to establish the fact that he lived. It may be one of the reasons why this story endures up to today. And there are many records again that show that he did exist and have held positions of power. There are cases filed. There are also documentation that he graduated from a particular university. There's also a record of a man dying with that name in a hotel. The name is Hotel Zumloen in Staufen im Bresgau. I think this is also in Germany. And thank you very much for everyone watching. Sir Rex, good evening. Sir Dennis, good evening, good evening. And to everyone else who's taking the time to watch, thank you very much. So they say that he was born February 1564 in Canterbury, and um, it is what we're trying to do is we're trying to like find out at least just a small snippet of his history. And as others say, we may never be able to separate fact from fiction. But I still find it that there's great utility in knowing of this particular story. Like I said, there are many retellings of this story. Like many legends, there are unanswered questions, and we will try to walk the path laid for us by Christopher Marlowe. Again, this was taken from an original text by Christopher Marlowe and Goethe. They took it from the Historia von D. Johann Fausten. This is printed by Johann Spice, 1587. That's a German chapbook about Faust sins. And Christopher Marlowe, just as a little background, was born in 1564. I'm sorry, in Canterbury. He died June 1 in 1593 in Deptford. And this wonderful English poet and playwright, hailed probably as one of the greatest English dramatists before William Shakespeare. They were born on the same year. And Christopher Marlowe holds a master's degree from Corpus Christi College, Cambridge. And from humble beginnings, he was born as a cobbler's son. And there's, if you look at the first verses or the introduction, I believe he wrote for Dr. Faust. This is a play. Dr. Faust is a play, not a novelette. Um, so if you read through, I think he was also describing himself in a way, as most playwrights do or most writers do. Some of uh, the main characters' details blur with his own. And Christopher Marlowe, as they say, was one of the most intelligent and as also mysterious characters of the Renaissance, the English Renaissance. And Christopher Marlowe in 1587, after graduating, earning his bachelor's degree and then his a master's degree, he walks away from an ecclesiastical career. He was supposed to be, I think, a priest. They were grooming him to become an officer or like a representative of the church. However, he felt that life has different plans for him. He followed his heart in becoming an actor and a playwright in London. And like his most famous creation, Marlowe also shares the same as Faust. His life is wrapped, like I said, in mystery, in the clothes of mystery. If you if you go to, I'll try to see if I can add the links. I don't know if I'll be allowed to add the links that I got all of these resources from. We might get hit with um, Creative Commons. I don't want to get hit with that. Oh, good evening, Boogeyman, Ma'am Lilibeth. Good evening, Sir Tomato Can. Good evening. I don't want to get hit with like what's that? Copyright strikes. But most of this information again was taken from research. If I'll be allowed to, I'll put on the information. You can check out the life of Christopher Marlowe. It's very interesting. Very interesting read. There are as we go along, you'll find out that on May 30th, this is 1593, at the peak of his career, Christopher Marlowe was stabbed by Ingram Fritzer in the forehead, killing him instantly. This is only after 10 days of him being arrested and released under the suspicion of atheism. During this time, again, the church held very large power across Europe and almost half of the world, if I'm not mistaken. So the church had a lot of control. This is Uy! Hi, Cherry. Hi, Ma'am Cherry. Sir Mike Sarsa, good evening. So, uh, the situation around his murder was questionable. Also, the situation of his release, atheism at the time, uh, the punishment for this is usually death. It is akin to heresy. If you are, if anyone accuses you and you are found guilty of, if you're found guilty of heresy and atheism during this particular period in time, that would usually result either being burned at the stake, hanged, quartered, or very horrific form of death. And it was very questionable how and why Christopher Marlowe was released from prison. very little fanfare. He was released, and he was just told to appear daily before the officer of the court, and a lot of mystery surrounds this situation: why he was killed, how he was released, and most of his life, again, like I mentioned, is shrouded in mystery. During his college days, there were long periods of time that um, requested to he was requested to perform functions for the crown. So there are, how do you say that? What's the right word? There are gossips of him working as a spy for the English crown. And again, at the age of 29, at the time of his death, he was hailed again as probably the greatest playwright, even before William Shakespeare. They lived during the same period. So at the time of his death, one thing again is for sure: his place among the giants of literature. So uh, a little known, that's like trivia for Christopher Marlowe. There's a lot more. I hope you'd spend some time looking at his history. So I'll start without any theological underpinnings, but it's intricately woven into the story. What we'll try to do is we'll try to approach it from a logical standpoint, like from as we always do, um, from a psychological perspective. We'll try to approach it from that. Like I mentioned, this book has a lot of archetypal underpinnings, a lot of archetypal forms. And the story again is very ripe in symbolism, and anyone that pays attention to it wouldn't miss it even without formal education. The words and the style may be a little difficult because it's from a very, very old time, classical time. But if you just pay close attention, I think if we use our language as it is now, I don't think it would give it justice. There are a lot of words that may lose their weight if we translate it. That's why I would really love for you if you can find the original text. It's readily available anywhere. You can find it, the physical copy of the book or the PDF. Look for the tragic story of Dr. Faust by Christopher Marlowe. So even as a casual reader, you'll be able to learn a lot from this. So we'll start with the chorus. The chorus is usually either represented by a group of people on stage, or sometimes just as a one person. It's like a narrator in a way. Most oftentimes they are used in, uh, how do you say that? Directly communicating with the audience, somehow breaking the fourth wall. They're communicating, they're talking, speaking directly to the audience, just like Deadpool when they had his movie. He's oftentimes speaking directly to to the audience, and the chorus in this play gives the initial layer of the emotion and the theme of the play. The origins of the use of the chorus comes from Greek tragedy. Hopefully, we'll be able on the part two. If I'm not able to completely discuss this here, I'll try to. What time is it? It's 7:30. So I have at least half an hour. If I can, I'll do a part two tomorrow, just like the last time. We'll talk about more as we go along about comedies, tragedies, types of theater. There are more, but we'll only focus on the tragedies. We'll try to define that. There's a beautiful article that was written about it. I'd love to share that with you. Hopefully in part two. If you begin to read the story, it would be far easier now, especially with the aid of technology. Again, take advantage of your tablets, your laptops, or whatnot. Look at the text, search for the background. The opening line of this particular play alone is a wonderful example of, I think, the beauty of the language during that particular time. They were laying a very firm foundation about the story itself. The opening line is not marching in the field of Tasmin, where Mars did mate with the warlike Carthagins. Um, like, what does it have to do with the story? If you Google it, the fields of Tilasmin, I think so soaked in blood. It may still be read to this day. This is where one of the greatest wars of the Greeks and Carthagins was fought. This is where General Hannibal, my personal hero, one man can defeat a whole nation in a way. Look into that Hannibal Barca. He defeated the armies of Rome in this particular field. And like I said, it layers a lot of metaphors, archetypes. If you look at the history of Hannibal of Barca, he is, as they say, the greatest tactical mind during his time. And some say there's no relation to this for the armies of Rome or for this particular story. But if you can see that during the time of Marlowe, the story, like other very popular plays at the time, is usually talking about the glories of war or like failed kingdoms as tragedies go. Usually, they're also talking about warriors glorified for their victories. But Marlowe chose to open the play with that particular line to show that this story does not follow the usual path. We are talking about a simple man, a man in obscurity. He may be well known, but only around his immediate, only around his immediate probably network, not as popular as the usual heroes. So, good evening, ma'am, Cassie. Hopefully, I'll do justice to this. And so it wasn't the usual story that plays were based on. As tragedies go, it was a story of a man blinded by very temporal things like riches, self, what's that? Hubris, as they say. He wanted the easy things in life. He didn't want any further sacrifice, hard work, or effort. It was all about instant gratification. That's what he was looking for. Good evening, Zerky. Good evening. So, with arrogance flying higher into the sun, as the chorus said, like Icarus. So, all of this is just from the first line alone. So as you go along, you will meet our good Dr. Faust. Again, he's not the usual hero. He's not the usual. I think it may be the first, or if not, no, no, I don't think he's the first, but he's one of the best examples of an anti-hero in a way. But there could be no redeeming qualities, so we can't say he's a hero. He's basically a villain. So, um, so from there, we'll be introduced to who Faust is, his humble beginnings, like I mentioned earlier, almost relatable to the beginnings of the author himself. The man was a master of letters, almost all of the branches of human knowledge, even the arcane, such as necromancy or raising the dead. He has been compared to Simon Magus. Please try to look that up. That's also an interesting read. I think Simon Magus in some texts of the Bible is also mentioned. Look into that. So we find Dr. Faust in his study lamenting the emptiness where he found at the top of the mountain of human endeavors, as they call, like the pinnacle of human endeavors. We are listening to him, asking for like what all his knowledge is for, like what's the purpose of anything and everything. He was questioning his existence. Good evening, Sir Winter. Good evening. So we'll find that I think meaninglessness has been the bane of man's existence from time immemorial. Like once you reach the limitations, once you've reached the pinnacle, let's say, of success in any field, I think you start to rest on your laurels, maybe. You will also see some parts of the story where if you don't have that, it's hard to separate the religious aspect of the story from it. But if you don't have faith, which let's just translate into maybe a higher purpose for yourself, a higher meaning to what you're doing, if you can't find satisfaction in what you're doing, like if you're always just looking at achieving it, like just another hurdle, if you don't find worthiness for a particular cause, you'll end up questioning it. You'll end up being bored in a way. That's why, as from the opening lines, we find ourselves here because of um, that, the idleness, the restlessness. If you are aimless, if you are without without purpose or like deeper meaning to what you're doing. So from there, uh, Faust starts or begins to go down into a rabbit hole. He starts he starts to find y- the futility of his existence. Like he feels that he has wasted all his time learning and expanding his knowledge. We will hear him speak of the inadequacies of logic, the uselessness of law, medicine, divinity, all because of its perceived limitations. As everything man-made, because of course his supreme intellect, he says that this is all useless if you're unable to maximize it. There are beautiful lines on how he questions everything. Thank you, Ma'am Dorothy. Good evening. So, like I mentioned, everything man-made is as the same. It's bound by its creator, by the same restraints of its own creation. And as the story goes along, he seeks the counsel of two well-known persons of his age as well. And from the story, you'll be able to read that these people represent good and evil in two ways. First, the representative of good, Valdez and Cornelius. He was unaware that he was speaking to angels at the time before he spoke to the people themselves. So Valdez is the good angel and Cornelius is the representation of evil. Both famous witchcrafter and the other is a magician. Again, during this time, these are popular, how do you say that, lines of work. These, I think witchcraft and magic at the time still held some prestige. It wasn't a laughing matter like it is now. Um, so in part, we will see a layer or layers upon layers again in the conversation between Faust and these two angels. In part, we'll see simply Faust was simply trying to find justification. He wanted to cross that line. He wanted to push the envelope of his knowledge. And I think it doesn't take an expert to see the the lines being blurred. He was just simply trying to find an excuse, someone to justify his reasons in pursuing the esoteric path, or you can say, you can also say that he was swayed by the sweet words of Cornelius, appealing to his pride. We don't know. I will leave that to you how you would interpret it. And like again, it doesn't take an expert to understand most often than not that we are prejudiced by the decisions we have made. We most often than not pretend to seek guidance and twist the facts to fit our motivations, the own path we've already created in our own mind. Like I said, why we may never know. Do we unconsciously seek the assurance of an excuse, a way out in the end of it all when it all falls apart? Or is it all a conscious choice and we're only pretending not to be aware of it? And just so we can have an excuse to say that I was influenced, I was forced, I was told, I was blah, blah, blah. So the person committing the act will only be the one to say for sure if he has enough temerity. Is that the right word? Temerity? If he has enough honesty in himself to admit, this is why I did that, in all honesty. We will never know, like I said. So, as the story goes, we find our good friend Faust making the choice, summoning the demon of Mephistopheles. And we'll pause here for a second just for context. If I failed to mention about the disputed A and B text of the story, Mephistopheles would be the perfect marker to which version of the story you're reading. If the spelling is Mephistopheles, that is usually the original text. That would be the A text. The B text of the story usually has Mephistopheles with I. I think there are two I's to the spelling of the name. So just be wary of that. And then there are, if I'm not mistaken, 648, let's just say 600 lines of words difference. Deo, good evening. Congratulations to your baking business. Congratulations. Check out his Facebook page, Deo D. Um, so if you go down the rabbit hole of A and B, there would be very very little difference. Like I mentioned, some 648 words, but the context becomes totally different because of that. One version they say, I think the A text is a lot more darker. In the end, if I'm not mistaken, the A text will show Dr. Faust being torn limb from limb in the end. Um, Prior to his soul being taken to the void of hell, his body is torn limb from limb. So that's also one of the things. And if I'm not mistaken, also in the A text, Faust is being watched over by Lucifer himself and other demons while he's performing the conjuring of Mephistopheles without his knowledge. The devils were already there watching him. The BTEC says nothing of that. I think that's what they removed. There are very subtle but profound differences. Like I mentioned, the power of words during this time, the meanings of the word are many layered. Many layers of interpretation again can be put into very few words with how they're using it. So we'll just continue from there. So again, the spelling of Mephistopheles usually is a marker to which version of the book you're reading. And so in course, of course, moving to the present, if you decide to go down that rabbit hole, there are a lot of sites, books. Scholars have dedicated their time and effort, some their whole life, as a comprehensive exploration of Faust and his legacies. This is, again, like I mentioned, one of the very few beautiful books that were written during this time. Good evening, Bugay. I told you to sleep. So, downward and onward into the dark abyss we go, following Dr. Faust's folly. Um, so, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to go down the context without religious underpinnings or touches. If we translate it into existential philosophical principles, we are still left unanswered. It poses a lot of questions, even in modern times. The source and reasons for the existence of morality, the truth of free will, causality, predestination, all of that is being laid before us by this story. It's a very short story. I think it's only 5 parts. Very short. Very, very short. But the layers, again, uh, it reflects symbologies of man's duality as well as his trinity. Man is said to be two halves of a circle encapsulated inside the circle, like the yin and yang. It is said that that's how man being the left hemisphere, biologically left and right hemisphere, and then wrapped or bound by consciousness. And then there's also the uh, like the leanings of if you're left-handed or right-handed. They're saying that there is that one, like they say, the consciousness or the soul. that controls the decisions being made by good and evil, chaos, or let's say order. I think that would be your unconscious or your conscious tied together by your conscious mind, the one that I'm talking to right now. So they say that you are the sum of those two, your unconscious and conscious, by, I think, if I still remember it correctly, this is the id, or is that the ego, as said by Freud? I can't remember. I have to really go back to school. So, in the end, you're still the one conscious balances between the two halves, battling for control. Some say it is the soul of man that thinks, decides, and make the choices we do in each and every waking moment. You are presented with choices and options regardless, and it's up to you to decide. It's always there, good or evil, and um, it's not even left to perception. It could look evil to me, but the circumstances surrounding it could justify it for you. It didn't look evil to you at the time. So again, it's up. It's really open. It can be complicated when two people are looking at it, because we're looking at it from two totally different points of view. That's why it's always left to you. Like they say, you and your God will have to sort your decisions out. So in the end, you will be held responsible for your choices. Regardless if you were influenced or not, you still consciously made that decision. You still consciously made that choice. So that's one of the heaviest questions posed by this particular story. And if we follow on down that path, the story again is not one-sided, as if Faust was not given a fair chance against the predestination of his faith. Um, good evening, Sir Warren. So y- you'll see the the importance of the story. If you take it just metaphorically, you'll still see the huge importance of the questions being posed by this particular story. We will have at least a peek into what could be our our decision making process in a way. As the story will lay out in front of you, daily we are made aware. We have all the information ahead of us. Faust was given the advantage through the story. You'll see that Mephistopheles, the devil himself, was given a huge advantage, unlike any other living man. Um, he was given an opportunity to prove the reality that there was God by having the devil there alone. Thus, so there is a God. And like I said, there's a void of meaning. There's layers upon layers of interpretation that you can put into this book. By reading the call of all the questions of theology has been answered, we'll see the true face of evil in front of him. Mephistopheles, when he appeared initially in front of Faust, he was unable to look upon the horrors of evil's true face. He even asked Mephistopheles to appear to him in a form of man because he couldn't grasp true evil. He couldn't stomach, as the story says. He's unable to stomach the face of evil. So from that line alone, man is really unable to accept or swallow when evil is faced, when evil is put in front of him, because he is aware that he can do this. He is aware that evil is also within him. So that's also one thing, that you are good and evil. You are your own God. So that's one of the few many layers. If you remove the theological underpinnings of the story, if you stick to, let's say, logic or psychology as an interpretation of the book, you'll still see that you are not given an excuse. The seat of your consciousness, the decision making still rests upon you. When you're faced with evil, it's up to you to decide. So again, we can pause for reflection. I think we're aware that evil is real. I think it's delusional to deny the existence of evil. The devils we know do not have horns or fangs or cloven hooves. We have to admit that they are real. They exist in the very beating heart inside your chest. Man or woman carries that. And I think we have to understand that. And I think we can go back to the heart of darkness from our last book. Evil or good, excuse me, lies in the heart of man. I love what you said, ma'am. Ikaw at ikaw pa rin ang nagdidesisyon. You can blame no one. Take the consequences of your choices. Amen. Very true, ma'am. Very true. Sir Romel, good evening. So there is no metaphor for evil. It is real. And we are just trying to use these characters to at least differentiate. Because if we don't have any form or any way of differentiating it, we might be blinded, like Faust is blinded by hubris. We can be blinded by our own self importance, arrogance, when we reach the pinnacle of our so-called success. So moving on, Mephistopheles attempted to explain to Faust, again, the consequences of renouncing God and paradise by just simply satisfying his mortal urges. Remember, this is the devil explaining to him. Um, by simply trying to satisfy the mortal urges, the devil himself describing hell not only as a place, but also as a state of existence, the horror of separation from the grace of God. This is the line. I really love this particular line. Thinkst thou that I, who saw the face of God and tasted the eternal joy of heaven, am not tormented with 10,000 hells in being deprived of everlasting bliss? O Faustus, leave these frivolous demands, which strikes a terror to my fainting soul. Those are the words of the devil himself, Mephistopheles. So let's remove religious context. This is the devil. This is already your your bad side trying to explain to you the consequences of your action. Let's say you're already sitting. What's the best? Um, what's the best example of temptation? Wait, give me a few seconds. Um, okay. Um, give me a few seconds. I'm thinking of the best hmm, moment of pleasure. All right. You have a wonderful family. You have beautiful job. You own a company or whatever. Woman comes in front of you, tempting you for that one moment of pleasure. Because I think this would be the best way to describe this. I think there are others, but I just can't think of anything else. So you have your family, you have everything in front of you. These are the eternal joys of heaven. Let's represent that with heaven could be a state of mind, a state of place that you are now. You'll throw all of that away for 5 seconds or a moment of pleasure. You will end up being tormented by 1,000 hells by just that one moment of pleasure. So that's the frivolous demands. And you're already well aware. Why? You've seen this happen. You have seen families destroyed. You have seen people lose their positions because of this. And you still follow through with that frivolous demand of your flesh. So I think that would be one perfect sample. Another is you're being offered a bribe. You accept the bribe. With that very small amount, you have traded everything that you are. So let's go back to that without theological concept or without theological context. If you say your religion or God is just sheer logic that permeates your waking life, if you don't have that higher power or that higher understanding, so against all reason, knowing full well of the gravity of the consequences of your choice, you alone decide to go against it, forsaking the evidences, the words of those who have gone before you and paid the heavy price. Your pride gets the better of you, and your insatiable hunger consumes your reason, and you make a pact with the devil only to touch the great mysteries of life, not even for 100 years, but just a mere quarter of it. I mean, that small speck of pleasure, is that really enough to replace a lifetime or maybe years and years of pleasure? If you take on that temptation of flesh, you lose your family. If you take the temptation of bribes or if you sell yourself out in any way, you'll be left with that hollow, empty feeling. And I think that would be hell on earth. While you're still alive, you're living without meaning. So these are your these are all your own interpretations of happiness, I think it's not joy nor even comparable to bliss in paradise. So, what was your paradise that you traded for that 1 minute of happiness? So, if it could go by many names, it's really up to you. The betrayal of your principles, your integrity, the hunger that you have, more, knowing that there's the meaning of satisfaction, the shortcuts that you have taken trying to cheat the system of life, things like that. This is not only money, fame, or higher possession or lust. It's only really up to you, like Faust. In the end, after signing his soul to the devil, or even before signing his soul to the devil, we are given opportunities to pull back. In the story, you will see Faust's body, even as a last ditch effort, the blood wouldn't come out after he cut his flesh. The blood congealed. It won't allow. It did not want him to sell his soul away. So we have to be aware of these signs. Temptation will always be there. Louis, good evening. Temptation will always be there. Temptation will always be beside you each and every day. It's just that higher you, the higher part of your understanding that will prevent you from leading astray. So this is your morality, this is your values, not even your religion, your values. You have to be able to define that completely for yourself. So in our pretensions to be more than what we are, in our search for our own personal glory, we often find ourselves without hope, and we end up in the hell of our own creation. And the story goes on to show how fleeting the moments of Faust's unsatisfactory and short-lived trade for parlor tricks. And Sir Warren says, maraming nakakaalam ng Biblia, nangangaral, nagsasalita, criticizing others' belief. My very simple question is, isinasabuhay ba nila ang mga alam nila at natututunan nila na aral sa Diyos? Amen. It's a lot better to just show, embody it, instead of talking it. Words are cheap. Words are cheap. It's very easy to say things. It's very easy to it's very easy to play the part, but it's very, very difficult to embody the very principles that you are trying to espouse. I think this is one of the many reasons people are losing faith in religions, because of priests, because of people representing a religion that is unable to embody the very words that they are saying. Before we look at others, before we try to judge others, before we try to impose our values on others, I think it would be best to begin with yourself. It would be best to embody it and let this be an example to others on how effective it really is. If you can carry your own cross, if you can carry your own burdens, if you can go beyond the hurdles that is in front of you, it will show. People will see it. People will start asking you about what you believe in. And people, I think, will listen because of that, because they see it, because they feel it. They see the truth in what you do and what you say. They coincide. That's why we have to be very careful with what we say and what we do. Never fall prey to your arrogance or your pride. Always have humility in yourself. Always come from a place of humility. I think that's where religion comes in. If we put this in, if Faust bowed down, if Faust looked at himself from a different point, he was not looking at himself downwards, he will not see the limits. If you look upward, the sky is unlimited. There is eternity beyond you. And there are a lot more you can do. But if you're looking down at yourself from a position where you think you are God, then you will see the limitations of your knowledge, the limitations of the things that you can do. If you look up, if you look up, if you come from a place of humility, then you will see the infinite possibilities of the things above you. So I hope in some way I was semblance of sense about the tragic history of Dr. Faust. We'll cut it here. I have to log in for work. If you want a second part of this, if you want to go further, or if there's any other books that you would like for me to read, let me know. The links are all there. You can comment, you can send me a message. Again, thank you very much. Good night, good luck, and again, this is Joey from Elias Journeys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Life is about making choices. Thank you very much.